The search for the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers is now underway as the team has officially announced their first slate of interview requests. We're going to be breaking down the 5 coaches that the team has officially requested interviews with today, breaking down what they bring to the table and why I actually really like this initial list of head coach candidates for the Black and Gold heading into the 2026 offseason. Now, before we get into the content today, the search is officially on here in Pittsburgh for the 4th head coach in the Super Bowl era for the Black and Gold. And whenever they make that hire, whether it's a week from now, whether it's 2-3 weeks from now, we're going to be going live whenever they hire the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button as well for daily updates. Whenever we get new interview requests, we're going to be breaking down what that coach would bring to the table as the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let you guys know everything you need to know about all of these candidates before an official decision is made. All right, so now we'll start today's show here by talking about the first head coach candidate here that has certainly gotten a lot of buzz surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers head coaching job. He's even gotten some buzz even before Mike Tomlin decided to step down, and that is the grandson of former NFL legend head coach Don Shula, Chris Shula, who's currently the defensive coordinator of the Los Angeles Rams, and this guy is the betting favorite to be the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers as we stand here right now. And Shula has really done a great job as the defensive coordinator of the Los Angeles Rams the last 2 years. He is 39 years old, so he definitely fits into that mold of, younger defensive-minded head coaches that the Steelers have always done. I think every single head coach that they have hired has been below the age of 40 and a defensive-minded guy, so Shula does fit into that kind of Steeler mold, if you will. But he's done a really good job as the defensive coordinator of the Rams the last 2 years, and he runs a quarters-heavy 3-4 base defense. He runs a lot more base and a lot more dime than the normal NFL defense, and he plays a little bit less nickel than the normal defense you see in the National Football League here today. We'll talk about his defensive scheme here in just a second, but of course Shula is the grandson of the NFL legend, Don Shula, who coached the Miami Dolphins for many years, and Chuck Noll actually worked with Don and cut his teeth as a defensive coordinator under him, and then he got the job in Pittsburgh. And according to a lot of people that were involved in the process, Don was actually a big part of Chuck getting the job with Pittsburgh when he got it. So, the Rooney family does have ties to the Shula family, which is why I'm sure the Steelers are very interested in this 39-year-old to be able to be potentially the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers and the predecessor to Mike Tomlin, and hiring him would be a really cool full circle moment for that family, because obviously Don is an NFL legend, and then Chris's grandson getting the head coaching job with the Steelers of all places would be a really, really cool thing. It would also be really cool if he got hired by the Dolphins, but this guy I would certainly like to be the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers if we have an opportunity to hire him. His defense and kind of the core tenets of what he would bring to the table schematically is they run a lot of quarters, a lot of cover 6, kind of like they always have, even going back to like Brandon Staley, and then under Raheem Morris they did the same thing, and now they've continued to be very heavy with the man match and the zone match stuff there in Los Angeles, and they run a 3-4 base front. So Los Angeles was actually one of the teams, along with the Steelers actually, that ran a lot of 3-4 base. Most teams have shifted to nickel as their base defense. Not the Los Angeles Rams. On early downs in particular, they played quite a bit of 3-4 base, which is 3 down linemen, 2 outside linebackers, 2 inside linebackers, the same front that we're used to seeing here in Pittsburgh under Mike Tomlin. But, a little bit of a difference with Shula's defense is that when they get into pass-heavy moments, they go dime package instead of nickel, where they put a lot of undersized, DBs on the field to get a lot of speed on the field, because plain simply, guys, if it's like 3rd and forever or 3rd and long, they're not going to be running the football. They're going to be passing it, and, getting more speed on the field allows them to do more post-snap rotations, those sort of things, and confuse opposing quarterbacks. So that's what he'd be bringing to the table in terms of his defensive scheme. And then in terms of, what would the offensive coordinator candidates look like if he gets hired? He's got a lot of really good options, honestly. Mike LaFleur, the current offensive coordinator for the Rams, doesn't call plays, obviously. Sean McVay does, so I'm sure LaFleur wouldn't mind a lateral move somewhere so that he can, prove to the league that he can be an effective play caller himself. The guy that a lot of people want is Nate Scheelhaase, and we'll actually talk about him here in just a second because he's also interviewing for the head coaching job here in Pittsburgh. But if Shula gets the job here as the head coach, I think Scheelhaase would be in the running to be the offensive coordinator as well. Zach Robinson, obviously that Falcons regime with Raheem Morris just got fired, so Robinson is now available to hire. And then Dave Ragone is actually a former offensive coordinator under Arthur Smith in Atlanta. He then went to the Los Angeles Rams to be the quarterbacks coach there. He'd be another candidate that Shula would think about bringing in. But speaking of these Rams coaches, and speaking of Scheelhaase, he is also getting a head coaching interview. He's actually the only offensive-minded guy on this list that we're going to be talking about here today. And this is somebody that's viewed as, maybe the next Sean McVay, and somebody that's going to be the next in line of the Zach Taylors in the world and the Kevin O'Connells of the world and the Matt LaFleurs of the world, the guys that have worked under Sean McVay and have worked in the Rams organization and have become really good head coaches and really good offensive coordinators. And, Scheelhaase hasn't just coached under Sean McVay. He also coached under Matt Campbell there at Iowa State, and Campbell's known as a really good culture builder and stuff like that. So this guy's got a lot of experience coaching underneath some really great culture builders, some really great, defensive and offensive minds for that matter. And, he's the pass game specialist for the Rams right now. He draws the plays for Sean McVay's game plans every single week in L.A. And, that's a position that has been held by a lot of current head coaches in the National Football League. You guys can see some of the, the coaches that have come and gone in that Los Angeles Rams offensive coaching staff over the years. Matt LaFleur and Kevin O'Connell and now Liam Cohen are the big three. Those are the guys that have had the most success coming out of the Sean McVay tree, but also Zach Taylor, the lone AFC North coach standing after the 2025 season. He's still kicking. Zach Robinson, I'm sure, is going to get more opportunities, and then Shane Waldron got quite a few opportunities as well. He's currently working for the Jacksonville Jaguars. But, when it comes to Scheelhaase, he's 35 years old, so he's very, very young, and he's seen as kind of like the next guy in that line in the mold of a Kevin O'Connell or a Matt LaFleur or a Sean McVay, right? And a lot of people are saying this guy is the offensive equivalent to Mike Tomlin, because Tomlin was around this age when he was hired out of Minnesota to be the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So if this guy is a really impressive interview, it would not shock me if he becomes the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. In terms of who he would bring in as his defensive coordinator, my guess is Aubrey Pleasant, who's currently the pass game coordinator on defense for the Los Angeles Rams, and he's the assistant head coach. This guy is seen as somebody that could be a future head coach in his own right someday. So I would say this is probably the most likely candidate to be the DC if Scheelhaase is brought in as the next head coach of the Black and Gold. Now, coming up here on Steelers Talk, we still got 3 more head coach interviews to talk about here, and go through the profiles of these 3 men before they come to Pittsburgh here in the coming days and weeks. But before we get into all that, let's have a word from our sponsor here at Harry's. And guys, life is all about continual improvement, and that includes the quality of the products that you use every single day. Your phone is practically a supercomputer in your pocket now. Cars can park and even drive themselves. Your headphones cancel outside noise like magic, but your razor, it's likely still flimsy, overpriced, and still stuck back in 2008. That's where our friends at Harry's Plus come in. Harry's Plus has an advanced pivoting system to reach every corner of your face, refined blade tech for a closer, smoother shave, and a weighted metal handle, which is Harry's heaviest handle ever for added control and comfort. It feels like an expensive shave without having to break the bank, but maybe the best part about Harry's Plus is how affordable it is, guys. Harry's owns their own world-class blade factory in Germany, which means no outsourcing and no middlemen, and because they control the entire process from steel to shelf, they keep costs low and pass the savings on to you. And if you don't love your shave, Harry's is going to make it right with you, no questions asked. Their risk-free trial means there's zero downside to giving them a shot. Just to show you guys that I actually use this product, I actually brought my own Harry's Plus razor with me here today. And the reason why I switched from their plastic products to the Harry's Plus razor here is because you get a little bit more heft, you get a little bit more weight in your hand with this metal handle, which is the heaviest they've ever had. And the comfort and control and the premium feel that you get with this handle, I definitely recommend it. And I've been using Harry's products since college, guys, because guys. I love the way that their shave gel and their post-shave balm smell. It smells terrific. It's really high quality, but also, the shave and their razors, they're German engineered, and, it really does give you that barbershop quality shave without having to break the bank. So for a limited time only, our listeners can get the Harry's Plus trial set for only $10 at harrys.com/chat. This set includes the all-new Harry's Plus razor, one refined 5-blade cartridge, a 2-ounce foaming shave gel, and a travel cover to protect your blades on the go. Just head on over to harrys.com/chat to claim this offer, and after you purchase, they'll ask where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you. Big thank you to Harry's for sponsoring today's edition of Steelers Talk. Then we get to Anthony Weaver, the former Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator, is going to be interviewing for the head coaching position here in Pittsburgh. Another defensive mind here. And Weaver is a little bit older. Okay, he's 45 years old. So, in terms of going younger and having that trend, it would kind of be a little bit outside of the purview of what the Steelers have done in the past. But, his defensive scheme, he's going to bring a Mike Macdonald-style, big nickel-style defense, whereas Shula runs a lot of base and a lot of dime. They will play nickel, but not as much as everybody else in the league. Weaver's defense, kind of like Mike McDaniel in Seattle and some of the other places that run this style of defense. Jesse Minter in Los Angeles, for example, they've run a lot of nickel, and they really run their defense through a big nickel player, Derwin James, Kyle Hamilton, now Nick Imanwari in Seattle, and it was Minkah Fitzpatrick under Weaver in Miami. Minkah actually played that role quite well, and if you bring in a McDonald-style defensive-minded head coach, Jalen Ramsey would likely play that role here in Pittsburgh moving forward. But he's a former player, guys. He played actually for the Ravens, and he was an assistant coach for the Ravens under Mike Macdonald. Got the Miami Dolphins job when the Macdonald kind of defensive scheme was all the craze. That Miami defense wasn't special there when he was the defensive coordinator, but I would also say that they didn't necessarily give him the horses to be able to have a great defense. But, he has a presence to him, man. You listen to him talk in his press conferences, like he talks about violence, and you can tell he's got a presence to him. I think this is the type of guy that could stand in front of the Steelers players in Mike Tomlin's previous meeting room and really deliver a message and have everybody be engaged and buy into his culture. Plus, he's got some pretty decent offensive coordinator connections that we'll talk about here in a second. But if you guys kind of want to know what the tenets are of a Mike Macdonald defense, this is kind of what my summary would be. It's a nickel-based defense essentially. So 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers, and 5 DBs are out there pretty much all the time. It's really based out of a big nickel type of player that can be out there and be a run defender but can also cover. That would be Jalen Ramsey here in Pittsburgh. If we get a McDonald-style defense, 2 high safety structure, I think that fits what the Steelers do well. That's what they did well this year. Also match-heavy scheme. I mean, the Steelers, I think, were number 1 in the entire league in running quarters this year. They didn't run it all that much, but they're pretty darn good at it, so that would certainly be a fit here. Post-snap rotation heavy. Mike Macdonald and his associates and his disciples like to get creative with some of these post-snap rotations, and then sim pressure looks as well. They'll bring a linebacker or a DB, and then they'll drop an edge rusher or even a defensive tackle out into a zone to guard the pass. So they like to get creative in that way. It's a modern defense, all these different things. So I would love to have this guy and have this style of defense here in Pittsburgh. And I think Anthony Weaver's got some pretty decent offensive coordinator, options if he gets the job. Mike McDaniel, if he doesn't get a head coaching gig this year, he could be brought on as the offensive coordinator. Of course, that'd be switching positions. McDaniel was the head coach in Miami while Weaver was there, so that'd be a little bit weird. But to get a guy like Mike McDaniel as your OC would be awesome. Todd Monken is another guy that you could think about. Frank Smith, who was the offensive coordinator there in Miami, or Darrell Bevell, the quarterback's coach in Miami. All those guys are available to coach right now. So that would certainly be good if you could get any of those guys, in my opinion, which is why I think Anthony Weaver is maybe a little bit more of a dark horse candidate to maybe get this job. But then we get to another defensive guy here in Jesse Minter, the guy that's in his low 40s here, defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Chargers. He's a pretty popular name actually in Baltimore right now. He's actually the better betting favorite to be the next head coach of the Baltimore Ravens, but he will also be interviewing for the Pittsburgh Steelers head job here. He's only 42 years old, so he's not under the age of 40. He would be the oldest hire at head coach in Steelers history, but he's still pretty darn young. He would also bring that Mike Macdonald style big nickel defense. His big nickel is Derwin James, one of the best in the league, and you guys can see the results in that Chargers defense. It's absolutely awesome, and it has been all season long. And he is considered the favorite to be the Ravens head coach right now. So honestly, I don't think Minter is like at the top of the Steelers' list, but I do think that if he really knocks Art Rooney and Omar Khan's socks off in the interview, that he could be somebody that maybe could be considered at the end of the day. Now, my concern with Jesse Minter is that tree, the Harbaugh tree, doesn't have a whole lot of like high-end offensive minds, swirling around that are available to be offensive coordinators. Honestly, I think probably the highest value or highest quality guy that he would be able to pull would be a guy like Todd Monken. Now, Monken, somebody that's been considered for head coaching positions. He's been a pretty decent offensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens the last several years. He was a coordinator there when Lamar Jackson was winning MVPs and that sort of stuff. So I think you could do a lot worse than Todd Monken if you bring in a guy like Jesse Minter, but I guess we'll just have to see if Minter gets any real looks to be the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then, yes, my number one option, Brian Flores, is getting an interview tomorrow in Pittsburgh. At least it sounds like it'll be tomorrow. And listen, man, Art and Omar, they know Brian Flores, okay? They brought him in along with Mike T back in 2022 after, of course, he got fired by the Miami Dolphins. He had the lawsuit against the NFL that's still active, by the way. But, he is getting some serious looks to be a head coach somewhere this cycle. The Baltimore Ravens have also conducted an interview with him. There's been some whispers that the Raiders might be interested as well. But, Flores is only 44 years old. And for a guy that's been in the league in a prominent position for as long as he has, 44 years old is not that old. And I love his defensive scheme, man. I call it Flores chaos because it's so unique. You don't see this style of defense really anywhere else in the league. And, he runs, about as modern of a defense as you're going to find. I think he's a top 3 defensive mind in football, period. I think he's right up there with Mike Macdonald and anybody else you want to put up next to Brian Flores. He is as good as it gets when it comes to defensive game planning, in my opinion. And for me, he's my top pick for the position, okay? Now, I would be happy with a lot of the other guys in this list. I've talked very glowingly about Chris Shula and Scheelhaase and, all these other guys. I would be happy with those guys. But Brian Flores, man, I think I've made these 4 points. I think he just brings instant credibility to the locker room. I think that's important coming off of a Mike Tomlin tenure, okay? He's worked under Mike Tomlin before. A lot of the veterans in this locker room know who he is and know what he's about. And, Brian Flores walks into that meeting room, there's going to be no doubt about it. This guy can handle his business, okay? The players in the locker room, the coaches in that locker room, the people in the front office are going to know what Brian Flores is all about. I think that's important. Also, he's got that big personality and charisma. Now, some people might say, but Jack, we made a lot of enemies in Miami and burned a lot of bridges, and that's true, but Flores will tell you that, he made some mistakes there, and, he spent his first 15 years in the league in New England under Bill Belichick, and he thought that's how you had to run an NFL organization, just be a complete asshole to everybody and be a tyrant, so that's what he was in Miami. But now he's coached under Mike Tomlin and Kevin O'Connell, 2 more, player-friendly, collaborative-style head coaches, and he said that, he's allowed to kind of be himself a little bit more, and I think he would handle a second head coaching opportunity better than he did in his first chance. And then also, like I said, a defensive mastermind. And then he does have ideal offensive coordinator connections as well, which I'm going to discuss here in a second. But to just describe and to kind of break down what his defense kind of is and what the core tenets of Flores chaos is that it's a lot of cover zero, pre-snap looks. He's famous for that, 7-man at the line of scrimmage, cover zero look. But they also play a lot of match quarters, a lot of match palms. They'll run cover 3 rip Liz. They'll go into Tampa 2 and they'll drop out of that cover 0 look and do those things. He also loves 5-man pressure looks where he splits the field, and sometimes he'll play quarters to both sides. sides. Sometimes they'll play palms to both sides. Sometimes they'll mix it up, quarters, palms. Sometimes they'll go into a Tampa too. If you are a quarterback going up against this Brian Flores defense, you have no freaking idea what's coming, especially because of the pre-snap disguises that he deploys. Like, they change what their pre-snap look is sometimes 2 or 3 different times. So if you're a quarterback, you have no idea what's coming from the defense that Brian Flores is calling, and then the post-snap rotations obviously speak for themselves. This is as modern of a defense as you are going to get, and I think that it would work beautifully here with the personnel that we have here in Pittsburgh. But in terms of his offensive coordinator shortlist, guys, Grant Udinski might be one of the dark horse head coaching candidates, actually, in the National Football League. There's a lot of Browns fans that want to hire him. You listen to Grant Udinski talk, guys. He's the former, I think he's the former pass game coordinator in Minnesota. Now he's the OC under Liam Cohen in Jacksonville. You listen to this guy talk, man. He talks like Sean McVay about the game of football, and he's 30 years old, the same age that McVay got his job. So look out for Udinski, man. He would be an awesome hire. But also, Brian Daboll worked with Flo in New England. That would be another connection. And Daboll has a track record of developing young quarterback talent in the National Football League. Josh McCown might be waiting for an opportunity to be an offensive coordinator with Brian Flores, specifically, okay? Like, he's been one of the top OC candidates for many years now. And then Wes Phillips, he doesn't call plays in Minnesota. He's the son of Wade Phillips, the defensive coaching legend, but his son is on the offensive side working under Kevin O'Connell. He might like a chance to call plays and make an offense his own. So, these are some pretty good offensive coordinator candidates, man. And I think that Flores would be bringing that heat. And, he could put together a really good staff, in my opinion. But another name to monitor, in my opinion, guys, is Robert Saleh, the San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator. It would not shock me if we get news that the Steelers are going to interview Saleh at some point here. Benjamin Albright, who is technically like a Broncos reporter, but he's really, linked in and connected to league-wide circles. For example, he got every single guess on head coaching hires last year correct. So this guy, is clued in to the entire National Football League, and he says Robert Saleh is going to get a look in Pittsburgh. So, you look at a guy like Robert Saleh, and, he's 46 years old, so, he's a little bit on the older side when it comes to, Steelers head coaching candidates and who they usually like to go get. But he's coordinated some of the top defenses in the league recently, both stints in San Francisco. I mean, San Francisco's defense has somehow survived this year without the likes of Fred Warner and Nick Bosa. I mean, the most defensive coordinators would have completely crumbled with those two guys out, not Saleh. And then also in his time in New York, he had some really good defenses in New York. Let's not forget that either. And then also he does have those connections inside of the Kyle Shanahan offensive coaching tree. Unfortunately for Saleh, he swung and missed on both of his offensive coordinator candidates in New York with Mike LaFleur and Nathaniel Hackett. But there's still a whole new group here of guys that he's connected to that could potentially be hires as the next Pittsburgh Steelers offensive coordinator that I would love. Again, Mike McDaniel, you have that connection there. But then Clay Kubiak, who's the current offensive coordinator in San Francisco. That's not Clint Kubiak. That's Clay Kubiak, his brother, currently working in San Francisco. Doesn't call plays, though, so he might do a lateral move if he can call plays here in Pittsburgh. Brian Griese, former NFL quarterback, has been the longtime quarterbacks coach there in San Francisco. And then Chris Forster is their offensive line coach, and he's done a phenomenal job there in San Francisco. He's their run game coordinator. He could be somebody that Saleh could consider as well if he gets the head job here in Pittsburgh. So predict it for me down there in the comment section to finish up today's show. We've gone over some of the top candidates for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The first round of interviews are now set. Who do you want to be the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers? For me personally, my number one choice is Brian Flores, but I would love a Chris Shula as well. I would be okay with a Jesse Minter. I'd be good with a Robert Saleh. I'd be good, with a Nate Scheelhaase. I'm good with these candidates. There's not a single candidate on the list that we talked about today, guys, that I would be unhappy with if the Steelers hired them. So I think Art Rooney and I think Omar Khan are on the right track here. I think that they've found some really high-quality candidates, and I can't wait to see how this interview process goes over the next several days and weeks. Now, make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, we're going to be getting you guys daily and free updates on the Steelers coaching search. So if you guys want in-depth breakdowns of every single coaching candidate that they are bringing in during these next few weeks, make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Till next time, guys, here we go, Steelers.